and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. It was such a huge pleasure today to spend an hour or so with the amazing Yaron Gershovsky. For those unaware, Yaron had a 44-year career as musical director with the Manhattan Transfer, but like a lot of our guests, that's only the tip of the iceberg. When you've got a guy that's sat side by side with Chick Corea, has worked with everyone from the Count Basie Orchestra through to some great anecdotes around Herbie, Hancock, Wayne Shorter, he's recorded with, you name it. Yaron's been involved in it. Such an amazing chat. So yeah, I'll shut the hell up and let you jump into the chat, but I hope you enjoy it, and I'll talk to you at the end of the show. Yaron, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, sir. How are you doing this fine evening?
Thank you. I'm doing very well, and it's very nice to see you and meet you. And I can feel the vibe coming from all this faraway place that I love so much. That's awesome. So it's nice to talk to you.
Great to have you. So I thought we'd kick off, Yaron, with a little bit talk about what you've got coming up in your last year. So you're obviously an incredibly busy musician still, and we'll get into the history, but just tell us about your upcoming tour and what 2025's been like for you.
Well, 2025 has been busy, surprisingly busy. It was a transition from working so much with Manhattan Transfer, and then they stopped touring, and then we opened a new chapter in our lives. It's like we by all means, it wasn't a closure of anything. It was an opening and a beginning of something else. So that was good. And after releasing a record with Janis, we released a record. It's called The Colors of My Life, which is the songbook of Coleman, a very famous American songwriter. And he wrote a lot of standards like Witchcraft and The Best Is Yet to Come, etc. So we released an album, and we toured with this album, Janis and I, in Europe and in the States. And in fact, in a month or so, we are going to Europe again, and we're going to be in Barcelona. We're going to be in Sofia and Bulgaria, and so things are looking good. And I've been doing a lot of writing, practicing, playing, preparing my next album, and working on some other album projects and orchestrating stuff. So I've been actually busy.
Absolutely. Sounds like it. And we're going to talk about a lot of those areas you just mentioned, but we'll jump back to our sort of traditional question of asking about your musical upbringing. So just interested in your childhood in Israel and your first exposure to music and what led you to deciding to do it professionally.
Well, when I was growing up, I have an older brother who is a very accomplished piano player, and this thing about an older brother and a younger brother. The younger brother always wants to be like the older brother. In this particular case, I wanted to play the piano like he did. And believe it or not, I taught myself to play the piano. And I remember very well one early evening I was playing at the piano, and all of a sudden the song came out. I kind of figured out the magic of playing the music. And I remember my parents and my older brother were in the other room, and they rushed to the piano to see what's going on. So anyway, that's how I started to play. I took my basic education in piano playing is mainly classical. So which I still love today, and I love to play classical music. And later on, I started to play jazz, listening to people from Les McCann, Oscar Peterson, of course, and so it was. That's how it evolved into the jazz scene, and also I like to play pop music and rock music. One of my favorite moments in high school was when I played the organ solo of "The House of the Rising Sun" by the Animals, and this was probably one of my very few chances to get some girls looking at me. It was very helpful for my popularity. I played this solo note by note, man. So it was awesome. Along to playing with some Spencer Davis stuff, I'm a Man and all that stuff.
Oh, so that high school period you were still in Israel at that stage?
Yes, I was in Israel until 1974 when I went to study music at Berklee College of Music.
So let's talk about that, Yaron, because that's obviously a pivotal part of your life as well. So tell us about Berklee and you establishing yourself as a potentially professional musician.
Yes. If I may just, I was a professional musician before I went to Berklee because I had a very successful musical career in Israel, a short time, because it started like in 1971 too, and then by 1974 it was like, very successful career, and this is when I said to myself, maybe I should go and study and be a little bit more worthy of my success, if I may say so. So I went to Berklee College, and I became from a very well-known musician. Kind of, there was only one TV channel over there, so everybody knew when they saw me on TV. So then I went to Berklee, and it was like transfer to anonymity, which is actually it's a good life lesson.
And what were some of the key things at Berklee? And I know it's hard to summarize in a few sentences what you learned throughout a college degree, but what were the key things you picked up that you hadn't picked up prior to that date and that still stand you in good stead today?
One of the main things that I learned is, believe it or not, kind of getting more acquainted with the musical language of how things work in the States. And I remember it took me a while to transition from doing the translation when I was in class to just hearing it in English and that's it, without the need of. And I was very lucky to meet some great musicians that I played with, for example, like Kenwood Denard, drummer, who later on we played together with Manhattan Transfer, and actually he hooked me up with playing with Pharoah Sanders. Yeah, so it was he's still a great friend of mine, and so I met some great musicians over there. So it was a wonderful time there.
Wonderful experience, yeah. So let's talk about Pharoah Sanders, because unless I'm mistaken, that was one of your first larger gigs in the US. So tell us about, as a relatively young man going out. I mean, for those unaware, Pharoah Sanders is an iconic saxophonist, only passed away in the last few years. Just interested, tell us about those initial experiences there.
Yeah, it was actually the first, like you said very correctly, so it was like the first, if you can call it like big or significant gig in my musical career over here in the States. And there's a little funny story to this, if you don't mind. I mean, my oldest daughter was born on March 2nd, and on March 3rd at like 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting a call from Kenwood Denard, and he says, "Yaron, Pharoah Sanders is looking for a piano player. You want to come to audition for him?" So I called my wife at the hospital. I said, "Listen, I'm going to be a little late today to visit you." And I went to the audition to Pharoah Sanders, and luckily for me, there was kind of an immediate rapport between us that it was amazing, and I worked with him for a few months, almost a year.
And that I was about to say, touring. Was that your first? Well, it would have been your first US touring experience. What was that like for you, and what sort of an eye-opener was that for you?
It was very interesting, the whole touring environment, and learning how to be a musician on tour. It's a whole thing, It's like in the beginning you're kind of green and young blood, and you're like... and then you learn all this stuff and about how things work. And I'll tell you, playing with Pharoah and with the musician that played with him, Kenwood and Rael, Wesley Grant was playing bass, I remember. And it was just school every day to be on stage with such an amazing saxophone player. And he was very generous with me, and I had a few times, moments that I had my solos, and I remember one time there was like an unaccompanied solo they let me play, and like everybody got off the stage. I think only they wanted a little break, but doesn't matter. But so I said, "Oh, Yaron, why don't you go ahead and do it?" So all kind of things like this that were amazing for me and strengthened my belief in myself that maybe I can do it, you know. So because coming from a place like where I came from and meeting people like Pharoah Sanders that I heard about over there, everything seems to be larger than life. Like first night when I came to Boston, I went to hear McCoy Tyner at the jazz workshop in Boston. And I sat down, I heard him play, and then I said to my wife, I said, I think we should go back home. There's nothing I can, what can I do here? I'm just listening to McCoy Tyner, you know? So things like that. Everything seems to be larger than life, including actually, I heard about Manhattan Transfer in Israel as well. So it was also like a larger than life experience.
Yeah, and I mean, you made a great point, you're on, about it being like another schooling episode. So, do you recall from those early days with Pharoah, what were some of the key lessons you did learn about just your playing and how you fit in with other band members, or had you pretty much nailed that prior to that? You understood how to interact.
A lot of it was instinctive, and a lot of it was learning to control yourself in a sense of building and creating a certain musical line that you start with something small and you develop it and it becomes more involved and both melodically and emotionally by creating a certain, let's say, a solo. And also I had an experience of working in ensembles and writing arrangements and conducting and producing, but to sit with these people and be in a large part spontaneous and learning to listen to all the nuances of everybody and appreciate that they're listening to me and I would do something and then Ken will relate to it with the drums or somebody, and even Pharoah, the great Pharoah. So it was an amazing learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do need to mention, I know your website mentioned you did some recording with Wayne Shorter. I can't let that go by without a comment. So tell us about how that came about, and obviously Wayne, another iconic figure.
Yeah. Um, this was a time I was in Los Angeles, and I think it was before cell phones. And this was a time people that maybe I probably, of course, I date myself, but you would stay at a hotel and they would give you a little piece of paper. And the piece of paper will say, this such and such person called you and this number. So the guy at the front desk gives me a piece of paper and it says, Wayne Shorter called you, and then phone number. And I said, you must be kidding me. I almost threw it away. I said, somebody's pulling my leg. So I called. Thank God I did. And I spoke to Wayne and he said, look, I'm recording here. And there was a gentleman in Los Angeles by the name of Joe Vitorelli who I think mentioned me to Wayne. And Wayne called me, and it seems kind of understandable that I go there and see what happens, So I was mentally expecting, see you later, bye, nice to meet you. But it became a week of recordings. And we did the record Atlantis, which was his first release after Weather Report broke down. So it was a very significant and meaningful, and for me, forget about it. I mean, recording. So I said, what is this about me and saxophone player? This is like Pharoah Sanders and then Wayne Shorter. So it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, there's definitely a pattern there. And so let's move back again. I mean, we obviously need to talk about Manhattan Transfer, and I know you joined in 1979, but what was the bridge you're on from Pharoah Sanders and doing the work you were doing to auditioning or joining Manhattan Transfer? How did that come about?
Okay. At this time, a short time after I played with Pharoah, they came out with the album Extensions. And this is the album that actually made them very successful in the States, because believe it or not, the main career until then was in Europe and also in the States. But Extensions was like a breaking up thing for them with Birdland and all that. So Twilight Zone, and it's amazing, when they did. There was like the time that they released singles. It shows you like what the music was at that time. So the side A on the single was Twilight Zone, and the side B was Body and Soul, which is a jazz ballad. Like, doesn't get any more jazz ballad as this. And on side A was like a disco song, but it was. They were very, very They always were very, very versatile musically. So when they did the extensions, they put together a band for touring, and I was called to play the piano. And after one tour, I was asked to become the musical director, which after thinking 5 seconds, I said, of course. It's like, let me think about it. Okay.
And I need to ask you, Ron, because as you know, a musical director role can be very different depending on the band, the context in stage music and so on. So what was the actual role of the musical director within Manhattan Transfer?
The role was to make sure that everything musically on stage is functioning for the utmost perfect way. Good luck with that. But you know what I'm saying? The pursuit of perfection is eluding us always for the rest of our lives. But conducting, making the arrangements for the band. So there would be situation that they would record, like for example, in Brazil, the album Brazil. So I had to adopt the arrangements from the record to a live orchestra, or a band that we have. And the personnel in the band has changed from time to time. I'm sorry, but it started with saxophone and full rhythm section, piano, bass, guitar, drums, and percussion. And then it became just piano, bass, guitar, and drums. And then it became just piano, bass, and drums. So we went through some changes. So all these things we had to adapt to all these situations with the arrangements and covering synthesizer part. I always used like a piano and a synth. So it was like this situation that I had to take care of, and that was the part. And I wrote some vocal arrangements, but mainly the vocal arrangements were done by Janis Siegel or Alan Paul. Some Tim might have written some of them, but yeah. So all that and rehearsing with them, piano, and when they have to check out their voices and this is too flat, this is too sharp, and this is too loud, and this is too soft. So all this thing that has to be behind the scenes, that's part of it. And it's what we call the hot seat. It was a little bit too fast. Oh, it was a little bit too slow. Oh, it was okay. So all those kind of things. But it was all those things that we take with love, because the time that I spent with them, which was 44 years. I always joke, and I say I started to work with them when I was 5 years old. They say, Yaron Gershovsky with us for 40 years. I said, yeah, I started when I was 5. So.
No, it is an absolutely incredible career for anyone, let alone everything else you've done that we're going to talk about. But that one thing, people outside the US or who are unaware of Manhattan Transfer may not realise that there was huge diversity in the eras, and as you said, personnel, and there were quite different musical approaches. What sort of challenge did that pose for you as an MD? Like, there was a lot of innovation and evolution as well over that period of time.
The challenge that stood before any musician that was on that gig was to be believable when you play bebop, the same way that you are believable when you play a samba, or when you play disco, or when you play doo-wop, or when you play a French chanson like Chanson d'amour and playing a little accordion sound on the synth. So the versatility of the styles was always something that was very important to every musician. So that was the challenge and I enjoyed it very much because I always liked different kind of music, from classical to anything. I just enjoy it. So it's very important to be able to be so versatile musically.
And I know this will be difficult to recall because of so many years, but broadly, what were some of the keyboards that got you through that diversity of music over the periods of time? You mentioned that you used synths and stuff. What were some of the more memorable ones that got you through some of those periods?
So there was always the acoustic piano. There was a time that we used like a Yamaha CP80, which actually I have in my bed where I'm talking to you now. I have a Yamaha CP70 still, which is the most amazing thing. But like every most amazing thing, they don't do them anymore. They come up with some great things, and like the Walkman and the Pressman, oh, they don't do them anymore. Don't make them anymore. Anyway, the first synthesizer that I used is one of the first synthesizers that I used was in Oberheim. I used an ARP 2600. I used the Minimal. I used a Prophet 5. I mean, talking evolution of, because as we moved along, keyboard, and then there was M1, the Korg M1, and then there was a DX7, Jupiter 8, sorry, Jupiter 8, and then Triton, the Korg Triton. I later on, since I started to work with the Korg, actually from the M1, I became like a Korg guy. You know, I had a relationship with Korg, and I liked Korg instrument. And every time I go to Japan, I go to the factory. I meet, you know, and I was presented with all the new innovations and everything. So, and then there was the M1, and then the Korg Triton, and then there was the Korg, the Kronos, and there was the Kronos X, and then the Kronos 1, then the Kronos 2, which I have right here, and actually the Kronos 2, I remember we did a festival and played in a festival in Singapore, and Herbie Hancock was playing, and he showed me this keyboard, and he said, check out this keyboard, this is like an amazing keyboard, and he was right, and I've been using Korg ever since, with Kronos as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's an amazing testament to what a career just going from an ARP 2600 through to the Kronos. It shows you the period you've covered, which is just utterly amazing. So I mean, across those years, Yaron, are there some standout gigs that either challenged you as a player or just were iconic as far as location, or just things that great memories for you during that time?
Yeah. The great one of the memorable moments in my musical career with Manhattan Transfer was to share the piano chair with Chick Corea, and it was in the Perugia Jazz Festival, the famous Perugia Jazz Festival, and it was right after the Manhattan Transfer did the Chick Corea songbook recording, and he sat in with us on one of the songs, and he goes to me and he said, so what would you like me to play? Do you want me to play on the synth or on the piano? I said, no, Mr. Chick Corea, you got it wrong. I'm going to ask you, what keyboard do you want me to sit on and play, and what do you want to play? So anyway, I wound up, it's funny, but he played the piano and I played the synth. And I was sitting right next to him, and it was something I'll never forget.
Yeah, look, because we're a keyboard players podcast, everyone knows just what a pivotal figure Chick Corea was. And you've also mentioned Herbie Hancock in passing. So I assume you ran across Herbie at different junctures over the years?
Yes. The first time I met him, I think it was in the early 80s. It was a gig in Germany somewhere. And he played, and both of us were younger. It was, and I'm shamelessly before the era of social media and all this, everybody takes a selfie and everything. I had the smarts to take a picture with him to memorialize this occasion. And Chick, I met many times, quite a few times, and he was always so nice to me and generous. And right away when he heard me play first time, he said, "Oh, you play classical music, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said it was amazing to meet him and to meet Herbie. And I went to hear talking about Oscar Peterson in the '80s, early '80s. He played in Ronnie Scott, and I remember that the thought I had in my mind when I heard him play, that I don't want to sound impolite, but I said to myself, I don't think God could have played anything better than what he did, because everything was so perfect. The notes, the breaks between the notes, the timing. It was just most incredible thing. And then I went to meet him backstage, and I don't have a small hand, too much, but I mean, his hand was like wrapped around my hand. You couldn't see my hand. It was such. I'll never forget that moment.
No, I probably still wouldn't have washed my hand, Yaron, so I can understand that.
It took me about 10 years,
Yeah, that's
but
right.
my wife started to complain too much, so I decided. I said, okay, it's time to wash my hand already.
Love it. And so that's probably a good juncture you're on to talk about. You've done some amazing collaborations. You've just mentioned three iconic figures, but I have to ask you about some others that you've mentioned in passing. Dr. Lonnie Smith.
Yes, yes. There was a guitar player that I played with in New York by the name of Richie Hornberg, who used to play with Dr. Lonnie Smith. And then I got in the band, and we played and we recorded together. I remember it was a studio in Chelsea, in New York. Most incredible, most incredible person. And then actually, I saw him years later in San Jose Jazz Festival, and he was playing with Lou Donaldson. And actually, Les McCann was in the band as well. And this was incredible because Les McCann was one of the piano players that I listened to a lot when I was in my formative years as a teenager. It was incredible. So,
Yeah, no, Dr. Lonnie, an amazing guy and a huge loss to the industry when he passed away. And I have to ask about Count Basie Orchestra too. You're on obviously another incredible, I imagine, experience.
this is like this is like when we speak like this, I start to have this feeling that I'm kind of so lucky, but I am. But it all starts when I met my wife. I'll tell you, that's the most lucky thing that happened. But okay, so talk about Count Basie. We recorded two songs. Actually, my first encounter with Count Basie was when they recorded Corner Pocket or Until I Met You, which was on the Mecca for Moderns album, which was the first album I recorded with them. And I played the piano on this song. And it was a rhythm section. It wasn't big band. It was Steve Gadd, Abe Laborio, and Dean Parks, and myself playing Corner Pocket. And the song won a Grammy, actually, for them. So what a way to get in to this business and this part of my career. But when they recorded two songs with the Count Basie Orchestra, Bleep Blop Blues and Rambo, and it was a short time after, sadly, Count Basie passed away. So they said, Yaron is going to play the piano. And they were like, I don't know, it was a very, could be awkward, but sensitive, but everybody was very nice to me. I felt so undeserving, or so like, what am I doing here playing piano, sitting on his chair. And the rhythm section was Ray Brown, Freddie Green was sitting by the piano, and Grady Tate was playing drums. And it was the most incredible experience Tim Hauser told me that he saw me cry when I play, like shedding a tear out, like an emotional thing. I don't remember it, but he says so. So listen, I learned from the very beginning: you don't argue with Tim Hauser. If he said that, okay, okay. But it was a very significant moment.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned there about, sitting at the piano and maybe not feeling worthy or it being a surreal experience. Like we quite often ask guests, we all have imposter syndrome. How have you dealt with that over the years as far as, believing in yourself without, your ego getting out of control? Is that a constant battle to, not think you're unworthy?
Well, I'll tell you, knowing myself, and if you'll know me better, I don't have a problem with having an ego, but I'm always the worst critic of myself. I rarely like, I mean, not like, but many times if I hear myself play after I hear a recording, I always, I'm rarely happy with what I do. So my quest or my pursuit of improving myself is something I'm dealing with all my life. And I never had a problem I always was very appreciative and I always appreciated the great opportunities or chances I had in my life to even meet those great people and maybe share the stage with them. So it's an amazing thing.
And there's some collaborations over your career, Yaron, that you would call out that we haven't already talked about that have stood out to you as some of the highlights?
Recording my music.
Yaron, I'm really interested to hear about your solo output as well, because you've created some amazing albums. You've worked with some artists who have appeared on your albums. Just tell us a little bit about your career as a solo artist.
After playing with the Transfer, I got this bug about doing my own record. And believe me, it took me a long time to bring that to fruition because I wasn't sure about material, I didn't know, and I wasn't sure, and blah, blah, blah. So, but eventually I came out with a record. My first solo album is called Personal Notes. And I love this album until today. As far as collaboration and playing with musicians on my albums, standing out is like Boris Kozlov, bass player, who played with us with Men and Transfer. A drummer, Steve Haas, who played with us with the Transfer, was playing. Mike Pope, bass player who played with us with the Transfer, was on my album. Lou Soloff was on my first album, Personal Notes. Actually, a funny story about Lou Soloff is many funny stories about Lou Soloff. He was an amazing, amazing person and funny, even sometimes not trying to be funny, but it was funny. So before my session, we did the horns at my house in my studio where I talk to you now. And about 3-4 hours before the session, I get a call from Lou Soloff and he says, "Hey, Yaron." I said, "Yeah, Lou, what's happening?" He says, "Listen, can we move the session a little bit later?" I said, "Why, Lou? What's going on?" He said, "I need to go to the gym." I said, "I'm sorry, Lou." I'm sorry, but actually a saxophone player by the name of Dave Mann, one of the most incredible saxophone players I know, like as Lou Marini and others that I just did a gig with Bob Shepard in Los Angeles with so I said we can move the session. So and my neighborhood is called Fresh Meadows. So after the session, Lou Soloff goes out and he goes to the car and he says, "Yaron, what's the name of this neighborhood?" I said, "This neighborhood is called Fresh Meadows." And Lou says, "Well, my neighborhood, I live in a neighborhood that's not so nice as yours. It's called Not So Fresh Meadows." So this is Lou Soloff. He toured with us in Japan when we did the Louis Armstrong, after the Louis Armstrong St. Louis album we did. So he was Louis Armstrong and played with us. Amazing player.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so those, I mean, I think you've had more than six solo albums, and I think you mentioned you're working on more. So it sounds like there's plenty more to come.
Yes, I would like also to mention one particular. Beside, of course, I mentioned Janis, the great Janis Siegel, who also sang on my first album, and we did the Coleman album. There is a singer by the name of Aubrey Johnson that is on my Transitions album, and I did also during COVID. You know, during COVID, we were like at home doing videos, doing albums. So I did quite a few videos with Aubrey. I wrote vocal arrangements, like we did "The Windmills of Your Mind," and we did "Agua de Margot," George Jobim song. In Modinia, I did with Aubrey, and she's the most amazing singer. So this is one more.
And so, yeah, looking forward to what's yet to come there as well, Yaron. But there's another whole aspect of your career we haven't even talked about yet, which is your work in musicals and on Broadway. And it's sort of an area that I've always been passionate about. And I'm not surprised you've worked in that area with your musical direction experience. So tell us a little bit about your first experiences in musical theatre, and then I know you've played keyboards with Phantom and Les Mis, and that just, what different approach that required of you.
To play in a Broadway show, and because of my extensive touring, I could always play as a sub for the regular player. So to play as a sub, it's awesome because you get off the road and you're in town and you do something. But being a sub, it's like, especially the first time after a while that you didn't do it, it can affect your blood pressure, if you're not careful. So this is one thing about playing. I was lucky to play Les Mis, and I played on the Phantom of the Opera. And actually, in 1989, I think, I got a call from Cy Coleman. And Cy Coleman called me and he said, "Yaron, I'm working on this musical. It's called City of Angels. And City of Angels has a quartet of singers, the Angel City Four. And I would like you to write arrangements for them a la Manhattan Transfer." So I said, "When do you want me to be in your office? How soon do you want to see me?" So anyway, so we met, and I did the vocal arrangements for this show. That was a very successful show. He also went on in England, and it was touring in the States, and it was got Tony Awards. And so this was a vocal arranging gig that I had doing that. And I worked on some other shows as a musical director, like a couple of, they do like workshops before they put the shows together. One of them was Harold Arlen music. It was 1939, which I don't believe it became, I don't think it didn't become a musical. They're going through all these stages until it becomes. And Smokey Joe's Cafe, I was working in the beginning of this show, and which gave me the opportunity to meet Mike Stoller and Jerry Lieber, they wrote a lot of Hound Dog. Just because of Hound Dog, you don't have to say anymore. Love Potion Number 9 on Broadway, Stand By Me, just to name a few, as they say.
Thank you for giving some insights into that. And obviously I do need to ask you, as a person that still has an active career and hopefully many, many more years of playing to go, but do you have any advice for younger players entering the industry and looking to make a living? So I obviously understand the industry has changed so much and is always changing, but just some broad tips on professionalism and making a go of it.
I dare to say that one thing that I like in a musician is humility. I think we all have to have respect for what we do and respect for the people who do what they do with us. And it can express itself by the behavior around, but also in the music. Listen to what they play and relate to what they play and give them the space that they need. And I remember when when we did City of Angels, the famous orchestrator Billy Byers orchestrated the show. He was like, he wrote Shiny Stockings. He was in the Count Basie Orchestra, one of the original ones. And I wrote all those quartet charts, 4-part harmony. And he wrote the orchestration. After I heard, there's the reading of all the charts. And I went to Billy and I said, thank you for the space that you allowed us to have with our 4-part harmonies. So the space and the respect for the notes and the respect of the musicianship for your fellow musician. And also, one more thing, show up on time. Try to. That helps.
Totally valid. Yeah, no, show up on time, absolutely. Now, I believe, Yaron, you do have an amazing story. I don't want to talk it up too much, but I know you mentioned before we started recording, you did have an onstage train wreck that you felt you were able to share, and hopefully can look back on it and laugh now.
Yeah, it took me about 5 years after I could laugh about it, but but actually, in passing, we mentioned it before because I was a sub in the Phantom of the Opera, and there is a part in the Phantom of the Opera where there is a sequenced bass line.
I know the one, yeah.
So I was in charge of activating that sequencer. So it goes like, anyway, so, and the conductor is standing there and he was like a conductor that like, very expressive. And he shows up and he gives me the cue like, bam, and I push the button and nothing happens. It is on show. It's a show. The show is running. So what I did, I just played it with my finger manually. So I kind of got out of it. Everybody was laughing, but I think if I have any situation of high blood pressure, it's probably you can blame it on this particular occurrence. Other things that are not so terrible, but also are not very, like you do a show and all of a sudden you skip, because I count off the songs, and we all have a show list, a set list before we go on stage, and sometimes you skip a song, and all of a sudden I count off another song, and everybody like, what? You're supposed to play Candy, and you're counting off, Twilight Zone or what? It's like, so a couple of things like this are kind of embarrassing but funny.
Yeah, no, I love it. And we do have the dreaded Desert Island Discs question, Yaron. So 5 albums, if you had to provide them that had a big impact over your lifetime, what would they be?
I think I would call the first one Night Train by Oscar Peterson. And check this out. There's a story with this. Well, the first cut on the album is Night Train. And then he also has Siege and Blues and other songs. But one song he has on this album is Mountain Swing. I was like 15 or something when I heard that song. 20 or 30 years later, I recorded that song with a transfer on their swing album. Mountain Swing, and it was like talking about a cycle of kind of thing, closing down. So this is, and also meeting him and all that. And another album that I consider to be influential on me was The Cat, Jimmy Smith album.
Love it.
With orchestration by Lalo Schifrin, which was like unbelievable. Just the opening for the song, The Cat, dun, 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 with the horns and everything. And a story about this too is actually one of the drummers with the transfer was Tommy Campbell, who played with us for a couple of years. Jimmy Smith is his uncle.
Wow.
He calls him Uncle Jimmy, So so talking about 4 degrees of separation, man. It's like life is full of these things. It's pretty amazing. Another album that I like a lot, being a piano player who many times I accompany singers, even like with a transfer, and sometimes we do a song in a show that's just piano and voice, like a ballad or something. And even on the record with Coleman record I did with Janis, there are 2 songs, just piano and her. So the art of accompanying a singer is demonstrated so well on the album of Bill Evans and Tony Bennett, the duet album that they did.
Amazing.
Which is like inspiring just to hear the way Bill Evans was playing with him and supporting him. And it was like an incredible music. I would have loved to be in the studio to see when it happens. You know?
Yeah.
Right? It was amazing. Another album that I love is Nightfly by Donald Fagen.
Yes.
He did this album, after Steely Dan broke. And the funny thing is, I've been playing now with a band of Steely Dan musicians. So, for example, Bob Shepard and Keith Carlock playing drums, and Freddie Washington playing bass, And we did a show in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, and we're doing another show in in San Diego, I'm sorry. And Tom Scott is going to play with us.
Wow.
Who played with them and wrote a lot of the arrangements for them, There is a story about the album Asia, the song Asia that they did.
Oh, yep.
And Steve Gadd was in the studio next door doing something else. And he walked in and they played Asia for him. And Steve Gadd says to Donald Fagen, he says, "Hey man, I must tell you, the drummer on this song doesn't sound bad. It sounds really good." And Donald Fagen said, "Yeah man, it's you." So I would never forget if I played on Asia. I'll tell you that. I promise you. I would never forget that. But I guess Steve Gadd, he's been doing so much stuff. So he's the
master.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So this is Nightfly. I'll go amiss if I'm not going to say that one of my favorite albums with the transfer that I played with is Vocalese.
Right.
And I think that Vocalese is an album that established them more as a jazz group than even before. And because I remember in the beginning we were touring, doing concerts, and it was like once in a while there would be like a jazz tune or like they would do Tuxedo Junction or all kind of stuff. But when they did Vocalese, they kind of committed a little bit to do more jazz, and we started to tour in all the jazz festivals like Montreux and all over the world. And I'll be amiss if I wouldn't say that one of the best times I had was touring in Australia, man. I'll tell you. I'm a runner, so some of my best runs were in Sydney, along the harbour there, and in Perth, everywhere, man. It's like, I love this country. It's awesome.
Mrs. Gershovsky, you've got to let him come back. Yeah, tell her I said that. Yaron, we want to. They were great 5 picks, by the way. So I think 4 of those 5 albums no one's ever chosen before. So you've given us some new things to listen to, which is amazing. Yeah, I mean, certainly some of those artists pop up and Nightfly's come up before, but no, not those particular albums. So that's amazing. Thank you. Our very last question is what we call the quick fire 10, Yaron. So it's 10 very short and sharp answers to what are hopefully fairly simple questions. So kicking off with the first album you recall hearing as a child.
First album I recall hearing is probably, I'll tell you, yes, it was Hold That Tiger by Fabian, American singer from the 60s. My brother went to the States at that time, and I was happily living in Tel Aviv, in Israel. And he brought back a couple of albums with him, including Gary U.S. Bonds. He brought Elvis Presley and Fabian. And so I recall that very well.
Yeah, Fabian was absolutely legendary in his time. Your most important pre-gig ritual you're on. So before you play a gig, what do you need to do to feel settled?
Walk around aimlessly, back and forth. They call it, he's pacing again, they say. I'm pacing. I'm pacing before I start the show. And believe it or not, one of the things I think the most about is the tempo of the first song, because you don't want to not do it so well on the very first song because then it's a little mental battle to keep it up. So this is actually my routine before I play. It's like a pace around.
Yeah, love it. And I'm guessing the pacing is a sign of a long-term musical director. That makes sense. If you hadn't been a musician, Yaron, what do you think your career choice would have been?
Believe it or not, I was always into. I don't want to get into a dangerous area because it doesn't mean to be. I was always interested in history and politics. So I remember when I was young, when I was a little boy, I said, they asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a bus driver and the prime minister. That's what I want to be.
There you go.
So,
Well,
but
it's
so
never too
I
late.
always was interested in economics and political science.
Yeah, great. No, that makes sense. Is there a favourite tour you've ever done? So just across all of your years with Manhattan Transfer and other acts, is there a tour that particularly stands out for you as a
One tour
highlight?
stands as a highlight is one of the. We went to Japan so many times, like every year for 40 years. But the tour that stands that I remember the most is the one that has to do with my oldest daughter. Her name is Corinne. And when I was in Japan, it was her 16th birthday. And I was so down on it because you know you want to be a sweet 16 with your daughter on her birthday. So what I did was I went and I bought a cassette of Neil Sedaka, Happy Birthday, Sweet 16. And I called her exactly at midnight. And I said, Corinne, listen to this. And I played her the whole song from Japan. So this is something I'll always remember.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Love it. Yeah, what a great story. This is an even harder one. You're on a favourite gig you've ever done. So a one-off show that if you had to pick one has stood out for you.
I have very fond memories of playing at the White House with a transfer. They had a show on PBS that was the music of George Gershwin at that particular show. The show was called In Performance at the White House. So the artist would go to the White House and play for the president and his wife and blah, blah, blah. In the East Room and all that, you know. And we played. Sarah Vaughan was on that. And we played Embraceable You. And I remember because it was only 2 days after Ronald Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev on a kind of a summit meeting on a ship somewhere on the ocean. and then he and Nancy Reagan walk into the room. And the first thing I said to myself, believe it or not, I said, this guy just 2 days ago was talking about the fate of the world. And now I'm going to play Embraceable You for him, you know. So
Yes.
this was the thought that crossed my mind. And I remember coming home and I spoke to my daughters, and my oldest daughter says, I said to them, you know, I just played for the President of the United States. And she says to me, does he know that you have 3 daughters? So I said, I'm sure he knows much more than that about me if he wants to, you know. But but
That's right.
it was a very precious moment.
Yes, absolutely. And if you had to pick a favourite city in the world you're on that you like playing, what would it be?
Well, the first
Anywhere
thing that
around the
comes to mind
world?
is Tel Aviv because I was born there,
Yeah.
and I don't have an accent when I'm there. When I speak the language, I'm not
true.
asked to spell my name all the time. Yaron who? Yaron what?
Yes.
Yaron. What are you talking about? And so it's such a listen. You can take the guy. I'm going to be very corny. Take the guy out of the place, but you can't take the place out of the guy. So that would be a dream thing for me to do. And we did it. I did it many times with the transfer, and also with the musicians there. We played in clubs, and it was like amazing experience. And I
Tel
love
Aviv it is. No,
actually
love it.
a lot of places. I love Australia. I love Japan. I love Europe. I love to travel. Yeah.
Yeah, as you should. No, love it. Name a song that you may have played a lot. That you may have loved it even when you started playing it, but you'd happily never play it again.
Playing with a group, like with a transfer, for example, there would be a show, and then they would do another show, like another season, and they will revamp the music, and all of a sudden, some songs that we played, we find ourselves some of the Brazilian songs, like say Capim, for example, that Stan Getz played the saxophone on the recording. We played it after the Brazilian song. If you ask me now to play the song, I don't know how to play. I don't remember it at all. So the song went to oblivion, you know. And sometimes they would call a song and say, "Oh, we're gonna do this song now." I said, "Wait a second, we haven't played this song in 10 years. How can I remember playing this song?" You know.
Yeah, that's right. No, good answer. Do you have a favourite music documentary or movie you're on that it just, if you had to watch something related to music, what would it be?
I'm not sure. I've seen quite a few documentaries about musicians. Like, for example, I'm sorry, I must say the one about Jaco Pastorius, which I think
Good pick. Great
Jaco
pick.
Pastorius is a combination of so many things. For example, genius, but tragedy. You know, the gentleman died
Yes.
without any. There was no respect to him when he died. He was beaten to death. You know, and he was the guy that until now so many bass players are trying to emulate. You know, so I think the story about Jaco and the early days of Weather Report and he's playing with Johnny. I forget the last name. It's terrible. But anyway, Jaco Pastorius is a very colorful, tragic person.
Figure, yeah, no, great pick, thank you. And our last one is your favourite non-musical activity or hobby. So what keeps you sane outside of music, Yaron?
Running.
There you go.
I've been running.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned,
Yes, I've been running since 1995. I've done 6 marathons and numerous half marathons. Wow. And I'm running every day. Still, I ran today. And so my desire is, my hope is to run it as long as I can, until God lets me run. And then, you know, so I love to do that. It does keep me sane. And it's funny, but after a long run even, you get energized. You get energy. You want to do stuff and you're creative.
And so I'm going to ask you a question I hadn't planned on asking. You mentioned that you've done marathons, and obviously the psychology of running a marathon is a whole thing on its own. Are there any parallels with your music career and running a marathon as far as resilience or focus on the task or anything like that?
Yes, I would. I think it's a great question. And after I've done the marathons and I would do a show and some things will not be so right, will not go exactly how I want them to be, I say to myself, listen, after doing a marathon, nothing scares me anymore, you know, because the marathon is like, you know, it's a long run and it's very challenging, and after 20 miles you still have to run 6 more. This is where everybody hits the wall, you know. So the marathon taught me to be patient, to persevere, and not to let my hand off the wheel, you know, just to keep on going, because you'll eventually get there.
Right. And I think it's fair to say both on and off the stage you've run many marathons, and certainly on the stage you've won a great deal of them. And I can't thank you enough for spending this hour with us, Yaron. It's been an absolute pleasure, and
thank you.
Can't wait to see what comes next.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, and great to meet you. And next time we meet in Australia, hopefully.
And there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. It was an absolute privilege to speak to Yaron. He's had such an amazing career, as I said in the intro, with lots more to come. And we are determined to get him out to Australia for a follow-up. So, no, again, a huge thanks to him for joining us. A huge thanks to you, as always, for joining us. As I mentioned last show, we do love hearing from you. We're on all the socials. And I did mention last show we're on Reddit, so do check us out there if that's your thing. We've also been doing a little bit of rebranding. You'll notice that our graphics and so on have had a bit of an uplift again, which we just try and keep things fresh. A big shout out to our gold and silver supporters, the amazing Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you so much, Tammy, as always. The brilliant Derry Evans from the sunny land of Wales. Thank you, sir, as always. Midnight Mastering, Mike Wilcox and the team. If you need really well-priced but highly professional mixing and mastering done, Midnight Mastering is the go-to place. midnightmastering.com, or very happy to put you in touch directly with Mike if that helps in some way. And then last but definitely not least, Dave Bryce and the team at the Keyboard Corner at the musicplayer.com forums. Always a pleasure hanging out there. So again, thank you. Do drop us a line with any feedback. We always appreciate it. And otherwise, until then, keep on playing.